The experiment had never been made of letting Bertie enjoy himself. But why should it have been? "Life is composed of duties." What possible place could there be for enjoyment in the existence of a Prince of Wales? The same year which deprived Albert of the Princess Royal brought him another and still more serious loss. The Baron had paid his last visit to England. For 20 years, as he himself said in a letter to the King of the Belgians, he had performed "the laborious and exhausting office of a paternal friend and trusted adviser" to the Prince and the Queen. He was 70. He was tired, physically and mentally. It was time to go. He returned to his home in Coburg, exchanging once for all the momentous secrecies of European statecraft for the little tattle of a provincial capital and the gossip of family life. In his stiff chair by the fire he nodded now over old stories, not of emperors and generals, but of neighbours and relatives and the domestic adventures of long ago: the burning of his father's library, and the goat that ran upstairs to his sister's room and ran twice round the table and then ran down again. Dyspepsia and depression still attacked him, but looking back over his life he was not dissatisfied. His conscience was clear. "I have worked as long as I had strength to work," he said, "and for a purpose no one can impugn. The consciousness of this is my reward, the only one which I desired to earn." Apparently, indeed, his purpose had been accomplished. By his wisdom, his patience, and his example, he had brought about in the fullness of time the miraculous metamorphosis of which he had dreamed. The Prince was his creation. An indefatigable toiler, presiding for the highest ends over a great nation, that was his achievement, and he looked upon his work, and it was good. But had the Baron no misgivings? Did he never wonder whether, perhaps, he might have accomplished not too little, but too much? How subtle and how dangerous are the snares which fate lays for the wariest of men! Albert certainly seemed to be everything that Stockmar could have wished: virtuous, industrious, persevering, intelligent. And yet, why was it? All was not well with him. He was sick at heart. For in spite of everything he had never reached to happiness. His work, for which at last he came to crave with an almost morbid appetite, was a solace and not a cure. The dragon of his dissatisfaction devoured with dark relish that ever-growing tribute of laborious days and nights, but it was hungry still. The causes of his melancholy were hidden, mysterious, unanalysable perhaps, too deeply rooted in the innermost recesses of his temperament for the eye of reason to apprehend. There were contradictions in his nature which, to some of those who knew him best, made him seem an inexplicable enigma. He was severe and gentle, he was modest and scornful, he longed for affection and he was cold. He was lonely, not merely with the loneliness of exile, but with the loneliness of conscious and unrecognised superiority. He had the pride, at once resigned and overweening, of a doctrinaire. And yet to say that he was simply a doctrinaire would be a false description, for the pure doctrinaire rejoices always in an internal contentment, and Albert was very far from doing that. There was something that he wanted and that he could never get. What was it? Some absolute, some ineffable sympathy, some extraordinary, some sublime success? Possibly it was a mixture of both: to dominate and to be understood, to conquer by the same triumphant influence the submission and the appreciation of men. That would be worth while indeed. But to such imaginations he saw too clearly how faint were the responses of his actual environment. Who was there who appreciated him really and truly? Who could appreciate him in England? And if the gentle virtue of an inward excellence availed so little, could he expect more from the hard ways of skill and force? The terrible land of his exile loomed before him a frigid and impregnable mass. Doubtless he had made some slight impression. It was true that he had gained the respect of his fellow workers, that his probity, his industry, his exactitude had been recognised, that he was a highly influential and extremely important man. But how far, how very far, was all this from the goal of his ambitions? How feeble and futile his efforts seemed against the enormous coagulation of dullness, of folly, of slackness, of ignorance, of confusion that confronted him! He might have the strength or the ingenuity to make some small change for the better here or there, to rearrange some detail, to abolish some anomaly, to insist upon some obvious reform; but the heart of the appalling organism remained untouched. England lumbered on, impervious and self-satisfied, in her old intolerable course. He threw himself across the path of the monster with rigid purpose and set teeth, but he was brushed aside. Yes, even Palmerston was still unconquered, was still there to afflict him with his jauntiness, his muddle-headedness, his utter lack of principle. It was too much. Neither nature nor the Baron had given him a sanguine spirit. The seeds of pessimism, once lodged within him, flourished in a propitious soil. He questioned things and did not find one that would answer to his mind, and all the world appeared unkind. He believed that he was a failure, and he began to despair. Yet Stockmar had told him that he must never relax, and he never would. He would go on, working to the utmost and striving for the highest, to the bitter end. His industry grew almost maniacal. Earlier and earlier was the green lamp lighted; more vast grew the correspondence; more searching the examination of the newspapers; the interminable memoranda more punctilious, analytical, and precise. His very recreations became duties. He enjoyed himself by timetable, went deer-stalking with meticulous gusto, and made puns at lunch. It was the right thing to do. The mechanism worked with astonishing efficiency, but it never rested and it was never oiled. In dry exactitude the innumerable cogwheels perpetually revolved. No, whatever happened, the Prince would not relax. He had absorbed the doctrines of Stockmar too thoroughly. He knew what was right, and at all costs he would pursue it. That was certain. But alas, in this our life, what are the certainties? In nothing be overzealous, says an old Greek. The due measure in all the works of man is best; for often one who zealously pushes towards some excellence, though he be pursuing a gain, is really being led utterly astray by the will of some power which makes those things that are evil seem to him good, and those things seem to him evil that are for his advantage. Surely both the Prince and the Baron might have learnt something from the frigid wisdom of Theognis. Victoria noticed that her husband sometimes seemed to be depressed and overworked. She tried to cheer him up. Realising uneasily that he was still regarded as a foreigner, she hoped that by conferring upon him the title of Prince Consort (1857) she would improve his position in the country. "The Queen has a right to claim that her husband should be an Englishman," she wrote. But unfortunately, in spite of the royal letters patent, Albert remained as foreign as before, and as the years passed his dejection deepened. She worked with him, she watched over him, she walked with him through the woods at Osborne, while he whistled to the nightingales as he had whistled once at Rosenau so long ago. When his birthday came round, she took the greatest pains to choose him presents that he would really like. In 1858, when he was 39, she gave him "a picture of Beatrice, life-size, in oil by Horsley; a complete collection of photographic views of Gotha and the country round, which I had taken by Bedford; and a paperweight of Balmoral granite and deer's teeth, designed by Vicky." Albert was, of course, delighted, and his merriment at the family gathering was more pronounced than ever. And yet, what was there that was wrong? No doubt it was his health. He was wearing himself out in the service of the country, and certainly his constitution, as Stockmar had perceived from the first, was ill adapted to meet a serious strain. He was easily upset; he constantly suffered from minor ailments. His appearance in itself was enough to indicate